Shalom, everybody. Akiva Gersh here. So excited to be talking Aliyah with Dr. Faydra Shapiro. Dr. Faydra Shapiro is the founding director of the Israel Center for Jewish-Christian Relations and is a research fellow at the Center for the Study of Religions at Tel Chai College. She also writes regular academic articles and popular op-eds on Jewish-Christian relations and is passionate about her mission of creating greater understanding between Jews and Christians. Faydra made Aliyah from Canada in 2008, and with her then five children, and added one Sabra since then. Faydra lives on a hilltop in the Galil with her family. Faydra, so nice to be talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely a pleasure to be here with you, Akiva.
Awesome. Let's jump right in. Aliyah, it's a big topic. It's a big deal. It's a big life changer. It's a big step in a person's life. Not everybody does it. You and your family did. Let's just start off with the most basic question I think we can ask when talking about Aliyah is what motivated you specifically to make Aliyah?
Right. Okay, so this is a little bit out of the ordinary, but I love telling this story. We had not planned on making Aliyah. We came to Jerusalem for 1 year, and like just 1 year when I was on sabbatical. And so we came to do research for one of my book projects, and that was on Christian support for Israel. So I thought, wonderful, we'll take a year, we'll live in Jerusalem, I'll do research, it'll be an awesome experience for the family, but that's it, right? Then we'll go back to our real life. And everything will just continue as it was. So that was the plan, and it was going really well. But I found myself really kind of challenged in a very positive way by some of the questions that my interviewees, my evangelical Christian interviewees, started asking me about kind of, you know, what did I think? What did I think was God's plan for the Jewish people? Questions like, you know, what did I really think that Canada was the best place to raise Jewish children?
Wow.
And questions that I hadn't really asked myself. And that kind of kicked off a whole series of self-examination at the same time as watching my kids flourish. It was such a wonderful year for us as a family. And so I think those two things together, by the end of the year, I sat my husband down, very patient man, sat him down and said, honey, I think it's time. And he said, no, really? Oh, yeah, you know, let's wait a few years. Let's wait till the children are older. And I said, no, I think it's now. So we went back to Canada for 1 year to sell the house, to have another child, to, you know, wrap some things up. And we made Aliyah a year later.
That is amazing. I have to say, I've heard many stories of people coming back to their Jewish roots, you know, through talking to Native Americans in America, even meeting the Dalai Lama, where he's living in India. I've never heard a story of someone making Aliyah or being motivated to make Aliyah from Christians. That's really powerful and obviously very fitting for the amazing work that you're doing. So that's really awesome. There's so many questions I want to ask you, but because you already started to talk about your children, right? A lot of people speak about this reality, this kind of happening that when their children come here, and when they move with their children, despite any challenges that might also occur, and I do want to talk about that, but first, what did you see in that year that you were living here before you even made Aliyah that was so amazing to you, specifically with your children?
Right. What I saw in that year, what I continue to see, you know what, here's an example. The best example I can give you is all of our children, you know, even the ones born in Canada, they all, we gave them biblical Hebrew names. Because that was important to us, and that's our family's kind of values. When we were in Israel was the first time I saw my children called by their names correct. It absolutely floored me.
Wow.
And I thought, goodness, what a gift this is to give to your children where their names are not foreign, where they're actually like naturally in place, where they fit. who they are, or they're not always strange, exotic, out of the ordinary. They can just be themselves. And so that's something that I've seen over and over again, and really speaks directly to my heart as a mother.
That's amazing. I must say, my wife grew up in America as well. She's one of 4 children, and her parents were like super Zionists. They came to Israel every year for Pesach, and my wife's grandparents already had lived here from the 1960s. It's a whole interesting story, but you are very, very connected to Israel, very Zionist, and her parents too gave their 4 children, Hebrew names, no English names. And my wife says when she was growing up, going to the dentist was like the most embarrassing thing ever, because she's Tamar, but they would say like Tamer. Her brother Gilad was Gilad, and her sister Ronit was Ronit. And it was just like so embarrassing in public that like no one could pronounce their name, right? But obviously their parents, like you did, gave them this gift way in advance, for the future time that they would come home, and their names were just very normal everyday names. So that's amazing to hear.
I like to think of it as this sort of ideal that we were hopeful that they would grow into, and Hashem, thank God, it's actually happened.
That's amazing. So back to maybe another phase of Aliyah with your children, because there's so many people out there who love Israel. They think about Aliyah. It's like it's on the shelf. It's maybe one day. It's a dream of theirs. But obviously, to bring it into fruition is a whole different ballgame. And one of the big questions for people with children, obviously, upon making Aliyah, and probably for many people out there, they have not yet made Aliyah because of this issue, is their children. What will it be like for them? Are my children too old? Are they going to learn Hebrew? Are they going to have an English accent when they speak Hebrew? All these kinds of questions that abound for people who are thinking about Aliyah, and people make Aliyah with children. So if you can speak about that, what was your specific and your children's specific experience with making Aliyah? If you can maybe touch on like both the challenging sides of it and also the awesome aspects of it as well.
Right, sure. Well, first the challenging ones, because on the list of things that I was worried about, for sure, the children and how they would manage was my number one concern. And it turned out that it should have been my absolute least concern. Now, perhaps it's unfair because our children, 5 of them at the time, the eldest was going into 2nd grade. So they were all very young. So first of all, if I could suggest anything, don't wait. Don't wait. It's so much easier for the kids. I mean, I've seen lots of examples, and it's qualitatively easier every year they are younger. So, how would they manage in school? They didn't speak Hebrew. I had no idea how this was possibly, how would they make friends? We're just throwing them into gun. We chose a community that did not have a lot of English speakers, particularly not at the time, 13 years ago. And honestly, we made Aliyah in August. By Hanukkah, they were fluent. Wow. I had nothing else to worry about on that front. And I think that on the inspiring side, what I've noticed is really that I'm the one lagging behind, and that it's my children who are making me Israeli. More than anything else, I have Israeli children. And that means there's also a culture gap. It's a little bit surprised they don't know my childhood songs. They don't, their whole experience of childhood is very different. I can't help them with certain things. I didn't serve in the army. There are things that I don't know anything about. They have to explain to me how bagruyot, how matriculation exams work. They have to introduce me to the music. They have to say, Ima, you just don't understand Israel, and help me out. So it's inspiring and beautiful to have been leading this charge, and now to be being led by the children. And they are the ones who are helping me to integrate even further. So for them, it's a very quick, it has been a very quick process. And for me, I'm like the old mother, the mother from the old country, Right. And very, very humbling when you have to ask your 12-year-old for how do you spell this word? But it's a beautiful, humbling experience. So
100%. I think many Olim could relate to exactly what you just said. I can personally relate. And even though our children, we have 4 children, and even though they were all born in Israel, we have many of the same experiences that you just mentioned. I remember, growing up, like watching my kids grow up. Our oldest is 13 now, so we're still watching them grow up. But at the beginning, like many Olim, our kids' first language was English. Even though they were born here, they didn't really experience Hebrew until they grew up and started to go into Gan and out there in the world. And I remember at a young age telling our oldest kids, like, one day, just watch, your Hebrew is gonna be better than ours, right? And that day came really quick, much quicker than I expected. And exactly, like handing them our phone, did I say this right in this text? I have to say that these past few months, specifically being with our kids more intensely because of quarantine and Corona and all that, I've noticed 2 interesting things about language. One, they're fluent English speakers, but they know less English than I thought they did. There's just certain words they don't know. And 2, they've taught me a whole new slew of Hebrew words that I never even have heard of before. So like exactly like you said, we're being led by our children, which in and of itself may be a different discussion for a different time, but a little bit connected to some people's ideas of the future world, Geulah, Messianic even, but interesting things happening for sure on the ground here. Moving forward, another big topic, another big issue for people when they're considering Aliyah is work. Right? Like, what am I going to do there? How am I going to find work? Will I find work? I love what I'm doing in America. I've invested so much time in what I'm doing in America. All those questions, which are very normal questions for people to have when considering Aliyah. If you can share with us a little bit of your experience with how you either found or developed your work here in Israel. Your work is very unique and very specific and very special. So if you can speak a little bit about that, and maybe kind of throwing in another question to that is many Olim feel like, what am I going to do? What am I going to give to Israel? Like, I'm not going to know the language. I'm never going to fully become Israeli. I'm always going to feel like an outsider or an immigrant. What can I possibly contribute to Israeli society? Maybe I should just stay in my little Jewish town in America or in Canada and contribute there the way I have been. So if you can speak about those 2 things, that'd be amazing.
Okay, so I'm going to take those as 2 really separate questions. So I'll start with the latter one, and then the former about work. There's sort of this Zionist ideal of rejection of the diaspora, and that Israel is going to be this sort of completely different based on different values and all that. And I understand that, but what I see for a lot of Olim is that they're bringing not negative values from the diaspora, but really positive ideals and ideals that can help to strengthen Israeli society. So, putting aside work for a moment, just the ideals that we don't even think about, that we take for granted because of the environment in which we were raised, because of, the values that we were, taught by our parents in North America, things like respect for the environment. Okay, environmentalism is one of those things that Anglo-Olim, we have sort of bred into us already because the movement started earlier in North America. And that's something that we can really help to contribute, to lead the charge on together with Israelis, to make that something that's not strange, but something that is like, absolutely, we love this country. And if you love this land, you will care for it. Also, the work that I do in Jewish-Christian relations, coming from an environment growing up among Christians, where there's a level of tolerance, a level of understanding, a level of openness to that kind of difference, that in Israel you don't really, it's not obvious, it's not muvan me'alav, right? So we have to kind of teach that in Israel, that you don't need to be quite so afraid of people who are not exactly like you. Those are values that I think we can bring from the Western diaspora that can really strengthen Israel regardless of kind of what we end up doing in our professional lives. But that's how we influence our colleagues, our friends, our neighbors, the environment around us. How we raise our children also will help to build a better future for Israel. The question of work was really, that's really tough. I gave up a full, I gave up tenured professorship, submitted my resignation, and they, when I resigned, they said, nobody ever resigns from a tenured professorship. Yes.
Wow.
And I knew already that there was no way that I was going to be able to rebuild my academic career in Israel. Just the situation is so different. It's such a small pool. There was no way I was going to be able to do exactly the same thing. And that was really hard for me. It was hard for me because I'd invested so much. That was part of who I was for so many of us, for kind of over the age of 18. Our work is really part of who we are and our identity. But now, in retrospect, it was such a blessing because it forced me to think what I could do with those academic credentials and with the passions that I had in the academy that could be translated kind of into work on the ground. So while I still get to do academic work, I still work at Tel Chai, I still get to teach, all of those things, it's not the number one focus. So I think that for people concerned about work, it's a reasonable concern, absolutely. What you're going to be forced to do is actually going to turn into, I believe, the possibility of a massive opportunity for you, not to just like reinvent yourself, but to also like reinvent the things that are important to you. You take the skills that you have, the passions that you have, and you take a whole bunch of chutzpah, grab all your gumption and so much perseverance and brainstorm with everybody, and you're going to have the possibility of building something that'll be different from what you know. It'll be scary, but it's going to be, it has all the possibility of being a really tremendous opportunity for you as a person and also for society around you. So in the end, I'm extremely grateful that I was forced to develop in those kinds of ways.
Amazing. That's amazing to hear. Just maybe a quick little personal connection to what you're saying. One of my big concerns, we made Aliyah in 2004, and I was already building up my career in Jewish education, working with Jewish teens in America, and I was gung-ho about Aliyah, but my two big concerns were, one, not funny, but maybe different and interesting, was it going to connect to the land of Israel? I was such a nature lover and loved hiking and backpacking. And before making Aliyah, I never really explored Israeli nature. I always went to Jerusalem or Tzfat and hung out in the cities. So that was one of my major concerns, which turned into a big joke because the land of Israel is so beautiful, and I connected with it even deeper than I ever did with American nature. But the second thing was work, for sure. What was I going to do? And very similar to you, I was pleasantly surprised with the job opportunity that came my way, and doing something here that I never would have been able to do in America. But maybe the second part of my question, just in terms of contributing to Israeli society, a lot of people feel like, okay, you know what, I made Aliyah, that was my job. My kids are going to be raised here. They'll go to the army. They'll work in the high-tech business, who knows what world. They'll make a big impact on Israeli society. But me, no worries. What do you feel about this whole idea of like Olim contributing? I know you already started to talk about it, but like, what would you say to someone who's very specifically expresses that that's like a concern for them when thinking about Aliyah?
I actually think that Israeli society is wide open for the contribution of Olim, and we know so many cases of these like amazing, creative, organic organizations and movements that Olim are really at the head of. So I think that this idea that, I made Aliyah and I kind of put my feet up now, like that's it, that's the goal. That's really a shame. Like Aliyah really is a spiritual movement. And coming back to the land of Israel, I mean, I don't want to get too pious about this, but coming back to the land of Israel, like that is, that's a goal, but that's not like the end of the goal. That's really like the start of the new chapter. And so the question I think we need to be asking ourselves is like, okay, so now what? What can we build from that? And how can we be built from that? What more can we receive? Like living in Israel is amazing. It's awesome. It's very challenging as well. No question. But but how can we go further? How can we go deeper? How can we have more of an impact? And how can we let living in the land as a people, as individuals, impact us further? I think that that's like an ongoing, so Aliyah isn't something that like okay, I made Aliyah, I think is one of the worst phrases. You didn't make Aliyah, all right? You are always making Aliyah. Even from the land of Israel, we're still making Aliyah. And that's the question, I think, is how we can continue to actively and receptively be part of that process.
I love it. You literally took the words out of my mouth, words that I've said many times before. I specifically tell people I don't talk about that I made Aliyah or that we made Aliyah, exactly as you said, that we're making Aliyah. It's a process. And when we get on that plane and we land here, we put our feet on the ground for the first time as new citizens of this state. That's just like you said, the beginning of a whole new chapter in our Aliyah journey and process and adventure. And you know, it really kind of hit me in my early years after having made Aliyah, or still making Aliyah, is that, you know, that again, that opens up the door to now it's about acclimating to life in Israel. It's about becoming Israeli and all that comes with that. You know, one of my personal favorite quotes or slogans or mottos from the early years of pre-state Aliyah, going back to the second Aliyah in the early 1900s, was this phrase, you know, Banu Arza, Livnot Ulihibanot Ba, which you basically quoted in English just now, and that we've come to this land to build it and to be built by it. We're in it. Such a powerful quote, and really everything you just said leads to my next question, this idea of like becoming Israeli. You know, this idea of becoming in Israel, that like you said, it's a whole new chapter once we get here. Now that I'm here, how is this new world, how is this new culture that I'm part of going to impact me, affect me, and help me to become more of myself, maybe in a way that I never would have become back in America or Canada, right? So maybe my next question for you is this, related to that, is you know, you talked about it, and I love it, you know, bringing our North American selves with us. And I think that's so important. And I agree that we have so much to contribute. But what have you enjoyed, so to speak, about the experience of becoming Israeli? What new things have you either started doing or becoming, personality traits? What has changed in you as a result of becoming Israeli that maybe you never would have expected?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so probably the number one thing is I have had to learn to relax. I've had to learn to, because, you know, both, I don't know, maybe type A personality and being Canadian, where like things are ordered and you're on time for meetings and things work in an expected kind of way, and you can do 20 things by lunch. Making Aliyah, it was quite a shock to me to sort of get used to this idea that like, going to the bank might be your big achievement for the day. Like, what did you do? I went to the bank. Did you actually get done what you needed to? No, it was closed. Okay. Because it's not open Tuesday afternoons, whatever, you know. Exactly. Just kind of like relax about my need for achievements, my need to control things, and to recognize that it was okay, especially living in a small yeshuv, to allow kind of 5-year-olds to walk out of their house and walk to their friend's house and then come back sometime. This was completely unfamiliar to me in North America, but to learn to trust more, to learn to realize that not everything is in my hands. I don't have to control everything as much. This has been such a gift to me, a gift to me psychologically, a gift to the family, I think spiritually as well. So that I think was something that I really was very difficult to get used to, but that also now in retrospect, I can look back on almost 13 years and say that was something that really helped me as a person in my development.
Amazing, amazing. And I think that's kind of like the unseen side of Aliyah, so to speak. You know, people are so consumed by the process of making Aliyah, packing your stuff, getting a container to ship it, and to, you know, find a place to live, and schools for the kids and jobs for me, that whole part and chapter of Aliyah, you know, people barely, if ever, even think about beforehand. It's such a beautiful part of the whole Aliyah experience of this becoming, you know, our new selves on some level. But maybe it's best that way. Just do all the logistics, get here, and then enjoy fully this new, you know, part of it.
Absolutely. And I just want to add, like, all of these gifts and opportunities that we talk about, to recognize that that doesn't make them easy.
Right.
That these are difficult gifts. They're kind of you know, gifts wrapped in challenges. And, you know, and there are days that you'll cry. There are days that you're like, you know, oh my gosh, how can I handle this? How can I get used to this? For sure. It does not make them simple. And I think that Olim also should know that when they encounter those challenges and setbacks and fears, like, there's nothing wrong with them. So this whole, you know, living the dream, absolutely you're living the dream, but it's not a simple thing. There are many difficult, frightening, challenging days, and you're going to need help. You need help, you need community. This is not like an individual project. This is a project of the nation. And you need to find the people that are actively involved, that are going to help you, support you, encourage you. It takes really, I would say, 5 years to start to feel more comfortable. You're going to be kind of off your game for a couple of years.
Right, 100%. I agree. And I think it's a very important thing to bring up, right? That people should know that it's not just all, you know, roses when you get here, that there are these challenges, and that they are definitely part and parcel of the experience. But also, you know, those parts also make us into stronger individuals and people that maybe we wouldn't have become otherwise. I have a friend in Jerusalem. We have a friend in Jerusalem who likes to say, you know, whenever she gets frustrated, like whether it's going to some like bureaucratic governmental office and waiting online and people are cutting her and all these kinds of things, she's like, my soul has been waiting 2,000 years for this experience, to wait on this line in this office. And that helps her feel so much better.
Marvelous. I'm going to use that as well. That's marvelous.
Right. It's like, okay, if we put it into that perspective, I can deal with anything. Right. So, you know, there's so many things to talk about, and I'm so loving this conversation, but maybe to ask one last question. We know that there is a huge, sharp increase in interest in Aliyah amongst North American Jews, specifically America, with everything happening in the world with Corona and the balagan that's happening in America right now, you know, with racism and anti-Semitism and so many things that we literally, I don't think we could have foresawn a year ago. This level of intensity around these issues, of course, nobody saw Corona coming. But there is this rise in interest in Aliyah, and people are signing up and putting in their papers and in a way that has never been seen from North America since the beginning of the state. So, you know, maybe, I don't know, if you had like thoughts about that specifically, and or what would your message be to like this new kind of round of Olim? You know, this is kind of a new kind of Aliyah, a new kind of Olim that are going to be coming in the next months or years. Well, from your experience of living here so long so far, what would you want to share with them?
Right. I think that what I would want to share is simply this: don't be afraid. Which is like the easiest thing in the world to say, right? Don't be afraid. That's kind of a process that each person has to go through for themselves. You kind of get to that place. You don't start at that place. When you know, you start. It's a platitude to say, but to trust me, don't be afraid. There's a reason in the Tanakh that Hashem says to people so many times, don't be afraid. Religious, not religious, is not my point, but really things will be okay. And I think that, you know, in retrospect, you will see this as a gift that you give not only to yourself, but to future generations. To recognize that if you could like imagine future generations in America, and especially like in the direction that things are going, God forbid, and then imagine the future generations in Israel, and try to kind of compare those, try to compare pictures of your imaginary grandchildren, great-grandchildren, a few generations down the line. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of today. Don't be afraid of tomorrow. But look kind of long-term and trust. Obviously, you have to plan and prepare and do all the things that we're asked to do. You know, don't be foolish. But at the same time, don't be afraid.
Right. I think it's a really powerful statement, and it reminds me of the statement from the Talmud that says "Mi hachacham," right? Who's the wise person? You know, Misha ro'eh et hanolad, right? The person who can see, you know, kind of what's coming in the future. We're not prophets, you know, but we're given minds and brains and seichel to be able to interpret and analyze events. And of course, we don't want to scare anybody. We don't want to, you know, instill fear in anybody. We would never want our fellow Jewish brothers and sisters from the diaspora to have to make Aliyah out of fear or safety. But there are people who are kind of reading the writing on the wall and making those decisions accordingly right now.
Listen, even before this immediate turn of events, 10 years ago, when we weren't so worried about, you know, this uptick in anti-Semitism, if you could similarly read the writing on the wall, look at if you know, what's the best thing Jewishly that you can do for your children. I don't mean religiously at all, but Jewishly, as a person who's committed to the Jewish people and to the Jewish future, what's the best thing you can do for them Jewishly?
100%. I have to say, I'm literally in the middle of writing a blog right now that's all about why you don't have to be a Zionist to make Aliyah. And there's all these different reasons for people to make Aliyah, especially today. Maybe that wasn't true in the 1950s or 60s or even 70s, right? Israel was still very much a developing country. People would probably even call it a third world country. But today, with so many incredible things happening in this modern, vibrant society in Israel, I think there's so many things that can speak to so many different kinds of Jews from America, from North America, and from around the world when it comes to this idea. Maybe I would just end with this one thought, and again, connected very much to your words, and that is this idea of many Olim feel like they're bringing their futures here. You know, it's not so much about them, though of course they get to be part of the experience and enjoy the experience and have this incredible zchut, merit to be part of these ways of Aliyah. But it really is on some level, like when we zoom out, like we're looking at ourselves historically. We're looking at ourselves as part of the people who have moved around the world many times to many places. And if we could have this incredible merit to be part of those Jews that moved back to the land after 2,000 years, and then our children are just born here and they're not becoming Israeli, they are Israeli, it's just a powerful thing.
Yeah.
So, Faydra, I want to thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation. Just wishing you the best in your incredible and unique and very special work with Jewish-Christian relations. Continue on your journey with joy of making Aliyah. And thank you again so much for sharing your words and your insights.
Thank you, Akiva. It was actually really inspiring and encouraging just to like remember all of these things. So thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
For sure. B'simcha. Same here. All the best.
Be well.
Bye-bye.